Hello everyone and welcome back to Baron's Den for another Baron's Den Top 10. And we're working our way through the skills. We've already done Strength, General and Agility. So today we are moving on to the Mutation skill tree. Now mutations are seen by many as a weaker skill tree, but I tend to find that they're very useful on a select few players. So barring one or two, they haven't got the same widespread appeal as some of the General and the Strength ones perhaps, but they do some really interesting and useful things on certain players. The other thing to point out is there's a lot of players that don't have access to this skill tree. Really, you're only looking at your chaotic factions who can mutate that will even be able to receive these, so you'll see these a lot less than some of the others. Doesn't mean that some creatures of the Warhammer world won't naturally have these things, like werewolves have claws, and some of the big guys have prehensile tails. But on the whole, you're looking at your Chaos Chosen, Chaos Renegades, a Nurgle, Khorne, Khorne aren't in yet, Skaven, Underworld Denizens. These are the teams that will be using and utilising the Mutation skill tree. I'll do it the same way as we've done the others, so even though there's only 12 skills, I'm still going to do it as a top 10, but I'll just mention the other two as honourable mentions, as they're going to be the two that sit outside the top 10. The other thing to remember is it is only my opinion. Don't get too wound up and upset if your favourite skill is towards the bottom. Just is all about opinions, and everyone has a different feeling on different things. There might be something that everyone else really likes that I happen to just despise. It's just the way it is sometimes. Equally, I might elevate a skill just because it's worked for me once and I absolutely love it, and I can't help the bias lead me in that direction. So, enough with the pre-ramble. Let's get on to the list itself. So, first of all, let's look at the honourable mentions. So the first honourable mention, and the skill that I would definitely place in 12th place, is Ironhard Skin. So, Ironhard Skin. The Claws mutation cannot be used against this player. This skill may still be used if the player is prone, stunned, or has lost their tackle zone. This basically negates Claws. That's it. Now, sometimes when if you were to think about that in isolation, you might think, oh, Claws is the bane of my life. Particularly if you're an Orc player, you think, yes, I'd love anything that's going to cancel out Claws. However, I find there's two problems with this. One, not a lot of players have Claws. And two, not a lot of players can get access to Ironhard Skin. So take your Orc coaches and your Dwarf coaches who, if they could stop other teams utilising Claws against them, well, they haven't got any players with any access to this skill tree, so they just can't get Ironhard Skin. So they can't make use of it. If you look at the teams that can, Underworld aren't really going to be utilising it because of the low AV across the board. Same with the Skaven. Chaos Chosen, well, I suppose they could put it on the Chaos Warriors, but they need so many other skills, they're never going to get down to Ironhard Skin. And the Beastmen, it's only going to be like the equivalent of having Mighty Blow anyway, because they're only 1 over the 8+ of Claws. It's the similar story with Nurgle. So really, and then Chaos Renegades again, mostly armor 9+ anyway. The other thing to say is you could improve this skill a lot by saying it cancelled out Mighty Blow as well. Then you might find people taking it a lot more. The only problem with that then would be that you'd be really helping out those favoured of teams, those chaotic teams, because the likes of orcs and dwarves who would also enjoy it wouldn't be able to get used to it. And let's be honest, we don't need to make orcs and dwarves any better than they already are. Okay, and the other one that I've put down here in the honourable mentions is Very Long Legs. So what is Very Long Legs? The player reduces by 1 the agility penalty or jump over and leap tests. Moreover, +2 added to attempts he makes to interfere with the pass. Also, he ignores the Cloudburster skills. So, a couple of things to bear in mind there. First of all, you don't see a lot of passing. And even when you do, players are usually pretty good at positioning their players so they can skip round to the edge, so there's no interference necessary. You don't see many interceptions at all. I mean, I've played 280 something games now on Blood Bowl 3, and I don't know if I've ever seen an interception, maybe once or twice, so it just doesn't happen very often. Second of all, the Cloudburster skill, because people aren't passing as much, no one's taking Cloudburster. I don't think that's a natural skill on any players yet, so again, you're not seeing that part of that skill being very useful. A +1 to, we're reducing the negative modifier on jumping over and leap tests. He's okay. You know, if you were going to build in an agile leaping dodger, so maybe your Renegade Dark Elf. Is there anyone else that would be particularly good for? Anyone else you were going to perhaps burst in and try and get into a cage? You might find very long legs useful, but on the whole, it's very, very limited, and it's very edge case when you can use it. So, unfortunately, that is why I've ranked it so low. Of course, when more passing teams arrive in the game, if they ever do, or they go to a new edition, perhaps, and they tweak passing a little bit, making it more appealing to pass, then you might see people wanting to take this a bit more often. And don't get me wrong, I don't know, let's say you had very long legs, it was a slant team, perhaps. They redesigned the slant team, and they gave some of them very long legs across the board. You'd find that useful, you know. But again, if you've got one very long legs player, the opposition's just going to avoid passing anywhere near them. So it's an easy get around. Okay, on with the top 10. And in 10th place, I've put Tentacles. So, Tentacles. When an opponent tries to leave a square marked by this player, roll a d6. Plus the strength of the player, and then minus the strength of the opponent's. On a roll of 6+, or on a natural 6, the opponent remains where he is and his move ends. So why is Tentacles quite low? The one thing I would say, pretty much from, I reckon, about 10 all the way up to 5, you could almost put these skills in any order. They're very close, these next skills, so I don't want people seeing me put Tentacles down at number 10 thinking I don't rate it at all. It is useful. The reason it's so low is it's only very useful on a very select few players, and that's going to be your strength 5 players, because for you to regularly roll it, you need almost like a +2 strength advantage on. So your average strength is 3, isn't it? So you want, you know, to make it almost like a 4+, you're going to want a strength 5 player to have it. And then you think of how many strength 5 players have access to mutations on primaries. It's a very small pool of players, and then on top of that you think, would they take that as their first choice? Don't get me wrong, everyone loves it on the Rot Spawn because it comes with it and it is very useful. I would also make a case that if they were to ever tweak this edition, it would be great to see, I think, Tree Men get Tentacles, because, you know, with their vines, surely they'd be grasping at people with their vines and branches and stuff. So I think Tree Men should have Tentacles, and that would make Tree Men so much better, because they'd be able to glue people to them, so even when they take root, it could kind of help offset that limitation a bit. But very useful when it comes up, especially when you're on the line of scrimmage and you've got your big strong player, and people try and get away from you, or they try a blitz, and then your Tentacle stops them doing it. It doesn't happen all the time. Even with a 2 strength deficit, you're still having to roll a 4+, so it's not an auto by any means. But it can be useful. Okay then, in 9th spot we have Disturbing Presence. So Disturbing Presence. When an opposition player attempts a pass, throw teammate or throw bomb action, or he tries to interfere with a pass or a catch of the ball, he applies a -1 modifier to the test for each player within 3 squares who has this skill, whatever the state of these players may be. So, the brilliant thing about Disturbing Presence is it stacks. So if you've got 5 players with Disturbing Presence, and 3 of them happen to overlap into the area where the player's trying to pass, throw bomb, whatever, then all 3 will stack on top of that. Plus, even if they are on the floor, stunned, prone, whatever, that their Disturbing Presence will still count. So in that sense, it's great. It is also good to try and make it difficult for people who are trying to pass or catch or throw bombs and throw teammates. All of that is very useful. Again, unfortunately, it doesn't affect picking up the ball off the floor, which tends to be the major ball thing that people do. And then once the players got the ball, they tend to run that ball all the way. They might try a handoff though, so that's where the catch would come into play. So again, it can be useful. Again, the reason I've ranked it low is because not many people choose Disturbing Presence. If you were to get it as a random, it's not the end of the world. Particularly if you can smatter a bit of Disturbing Presence across your team. Obviously, the Nurgle team already have that in abundance with their bloaters, and it can work really well. But you're never going to choose it. There's too many other skills that are more important for players than this one. But when it comes up, it'll be really useful, and also it can affect how your opposition plays. They'll have to try and work around it to the point where they might even give up a passing play, which, when you're playing elves or Skaven perhaps, would be really useful to try and slow them down or change the way they have to play. In 8th place, we have Foul Appearance. When an opposition player declares a block, action, or a special action against this player, the action is lost on a d6 roll, result of 1. This skill may still be used if the player is prone, stunned, or has lost their tackle zone. So, I love Foul Appearance. In my current Necromantic team, I've got 2 Wraiths, obviously, that have Foul Appearance, and it doesn't come up as much as you think it should until it comes up several times in one match. And it can be so instrumental, particularly if the opposition player has decided to blitz. Losing that blitz can mean the difference between an entire play working or not working. So when it happens, when it works, Foul Appearance is brilliant. Of course, the problem is, because it is only on the roll of a 1, 5 out of 6 times your opponent's going to be okay. Plus, they can decide to avoid blocking or blitzing that player altogether, or limit how many times they do. It won't work as often as you feel like it should, but when it does, it can be very satisfying. You can also, it's a good reroll burner, this one, because people will fail it often when they're trying to get something done, and because it is only a 2+, it will tempt them into using a reroll, and anything that burns through your opponent's rerolls is really, really useful. So I like Foul Appearance, considered putting it higher, but I think because it is only works on a roll of a 1 when your opposition rolls, I just couldn't rank it any higher, but I do love that skill. And it's probably very underrated. Okay, moving into number 7th place, we have Monstrous Mouth. So, Monstrous Mouth. The player can reroll each failed catch. Moreover, Strip Ball skill cannot be used against this player. I've heard it said that this is a useless skill when the same people would rate catch as a decent skill. The thing is, this is catch. This is a mutation version of catch, except it's better than that because it has the element of strip ball the element of sure hands that protects you from strip ball. So it's kind of like catch with a bit of sure hands involved. Not the main part of sure hands, obviously, where picking up the ball you get a reroll, but the bit where you hang on to the ball even if your opposition tries to use strip ball is really, really useful. So it's kind of like a combination of 2 agility skills, or 1.5 agility skills. I think it's a good little skill. The downside is, because of the teams that get access to mutation skills, there's not many players who are going to find it that useful on those teams. You're not playing a passing game, you're probably not doing many stretch plays where you're going to be handing off. Again, I've put it on the Dark Elf Renegade, because if I'm going to be handing off to him, he's only a 2+ to catch. Well, it builds in the reroll and it protects him from strip ball as well. So you might put it on your ball carrier. You might put it on your ball carrier just as a protection against strip ball. But of course you might already have sure hands. So again, like with the others I've mentioned, very specific but can be very useful. On to number 6, and I've got Big Hand. So, this player ignores marked and pouring rain modifiers during a pickup test. So you might just think, well, that's okay, but it doesn't really help you to pick up the ball under normal conditions. Well, no, but if you put this skill on certain players, i.e. gutter runners, dark elf, renegades, that means they're just picking up on 2+ forever. No matter how many tackle zones, no matter what position it's in. And obviously those two players also have high agility, so if you can get two heads on that player, then these players can usually nip into these nasty tackle zones to then pick up the ball. So again, really useful on a select few players, but those select few players are it's so good on those players that I had to rank it quite highly. They can win you the game because they can just, if your opposition fails pickup or you've knocked the ball but it lands in a bit of an awkward area, you might have that player with big hand who can just nip in and pick it up as they normally would pick up the ball. And of course you can ignore the weather issues as well that will stack and could make it harder for your opponent to pick up the ball. And a game that could have been cruising towards a 0-0 because no one can actually get a good handle on the ball could be transformed by the fact that you've got big hand. So I really like it. Only on a select few players, maybe only on one player, but the one player that does have it will really, really make use of it. On to number 5, and that is Prehensile Tail. Now, with Prehensile Tail, I wouldn't have probably put this as high years and years ago. It's one that the more I've used it, the more I fall in love with it. So, -1 on a dodge, jump or leap tests for an opponent who tries to leave a square marked by this player. But very simple, basically. We see it quite a lot because some big guys have come with it built in already. So, Croxigors, Rat Ogres. So you already see a bit of it, and just being able to base players that you know want to dodge away with a player with Prehensile Tail can be enough to discourage them from even dodging away. I've seen it with elves where they're so used to rolling that d6 and it being a 2+ dodge, 2+ dodge. If you manage to get Prehensile Tail onto the player who wants to dodge, just knowing it's going to a 3+, it might dissuade them a little bit into doing it. It's also useful against stunties who are used to just 3+ dodging forever. Well, if they want to go through this tackle zone, they've got to do it on a 4+. It also stacks really well, so if you've got a player who's already got tackle and diving tackle, stick on Prehensile Tail, and it's just a nightmare for even the best and most agile dodgers to dodge away from. Even Hackflem might bristle a little bit more, possibly not because he's a 1+ dodger. Even really good dodgers will think twice when there's Prehensile Tail on them. Number 4, we've got Horns. So, Horns. On a block during a blitz, this player gains +1 strength. Okay, so we're into the top 4 now, and I think the top 4 are considerably better than the others now. So these next 4 I really, really rate. And it's really useful because when you're blitzing, particularly if you're blitzing the ball carrier, if you're trying to sack the ball, it's often, you find it's going to be a strength 3 against a strength 3. And you have to try and work in an assist, or you have to try and switch off your opponent's defensive assists. By having Horns on that player that needs to do it, it just makes it that you can go in and strike sometimes with just the one player. That can make your life so much easier. Really lovely on the Chaos Chosen team, where there's so many players with Horns, that it basically means that at any one time, any of your players could be strength 4 in that turn if you elect to use a blitz with a Beastman. So yeah, that just gives you options. Unfortunately, you're not going to want to give it to all of your players. You're happy to have that on the Chaos Chosen team because it comes built in with the team. But on a blitzer or on a ball safety, it can be really useful because it just means that, particularly if you are going to dive into a cage and you manage to get in there, maybe you've got some of the other skills to help you dodge. It means you might have that strength advantage now on that blitz. It is worth remembering that, of course, that is only on a blitz. It's not on a normal block. Okay, number 3, we have extra arms. +1 to pick up, to catch, or when they interfere with the pass. It's quite straightforward, but I love it. And sometimes I prefer this to sure hands, just making players be able to pick up the ball on a 2+. Or it can kind of work as a bit of a pseudo big hand, because if your player's already got an Edge 2+, having extra arms as well can help offset if there's a tackle zone on the ball. And sometimes I find that has a bit more utility than big hand, whereas big hand is only for picking up the ball in tackle zones and with bad weather. Extra arms, if coupled with something else, can still fulfill that but also do other things. Obviously if there's multiple tackle zones on the ball, then big hand would be better. But often you'll find the ball ends up in one tackle zone, and if you've got extra arms on a 2+ edge player, they'll be able to make use of it. And of course, it turns your average agility player into somebody who can pick up the ball reliably. So you'll tend to see this on Nurgle teams sometimes with the Pestigors, or Chaos Chosen teams with the Beastmen, sometimes even Skaven players, given the Skaven Thrower, or on the Underworld team. So I love extra arms. Not blanket again like with many of the other skills I've spoken about in this skill tree, but on that one or two players that really need it, it can really help transform them into being a much bigger threat and much more reliable. Okay, number 2, it's 2 heads. 2 heads, +1 to agility tests during a dodge. Simple. But you know what? On certain players, it's an absolute nightmare. Just watch my latest Underworld match against Underworld with my Necromantic Horror team, and how much fear the 2-headed Skaven Gutter Runner gave me in that match. And also, I think that is how I lost to Skaven earlier in the season. A 2-headed Gutter Runner is an absolute nightmare because they're fast, they can go through tackle zones on a 2+, and it just means they're such a threat. One of the ways of stopping a Gutter Runner is to stack tackle zones in the areas they need to dodge, but if they've got 2 heads, they're already reducing that, deficit to the point where even a 3+ dodge isn't that hard to do with a built-in reroll. So it's really, really useful, and it also means that players, again, who are normally average agility, it can make them into dodgers. So maybe your Beastman, who's a safety, who wants to be able to dodge away to block the ball carrier, or again a Beastman who wants to score. Same with the Pestigors. It's a really useful skill that you can use offensively, but you can also put it on your ball safeties as well, or other players that you want to nip out of trouble. So a little bit more utility, I think, than some of the other skills. Okay, here we are. Finally, number 1. It won't surprise anyone. I've gone for Claws. Now, I've said it won't surprise anyone, but I think this also demonstrates that this skill tree isn't as strong as some of the others, because whilst Claws is number 1 in this list, it possibly wouldn't even be in my top 10 overall. Maybe it would lower down. It's not as powerful as Mighty Blow, which I think sometimes when you start off on Blood Bowl you think, oh, Claws or Mighty Blow. But Mighty Blow is better. And I'll explain why. So when I play with this skill, knocks down an opponent, Latter's armor value is always broken on an unmodified result of 8+. First of all, it's important to say Claws is useless against anyone who's already got armor 8+ or below, of which there are quite a few players. So that does worth bearing in mind. Secondly, unlike Mighty Blow, this is only on armor. So if you're hitting an armor 9+ player with Mighty Blow, if you rolled a 10, for example, you could save your +1 for the roll of the injury. Whereas with Claws, if you roll a 10+, that's you still using your Claws. You don't get to then add the modifier on the injury roll. That's why I don't think it's as powerful as Mighty Blow, and indeed not even one of the best skills in the game. But it is still a very decent skill to have, because there are quite a few players, particularly in this Blood Bowl 3 meta, that do have high armor, and being able to break through that armor on 8+, even if you then only roll a stun or a KO, can make a big difference when you're trying to live with some of those high armor teams. So they're great against Orcs, they're great against Dwarves, pretty good against Chaos Chosen and Renegades, who've got quite a few armor 9+ and 10+ players. So it's really 10+ and 11+ is really where you want to get your Claws on. It's still effective against 9+, obviously, but I think if you were going to be up against regular 9+ players, you'd be looking at Mighty Blow more than Claws. Can you use them both together? Well, sort of yes and sort of no. You can't use Mighty Blow and Claws together on the armor roll, but let's say, for example, you break the armor with Claws, you can then apply Mighty Blow to your injury. So they're not as good as they used to be in the earlier editions of the game, where you could stack them, and it really helps you cut through armor. However, they can still work quite well together, so that's certainly worth bearing in mind. And then anything that helps you with removal of players has to be ranked highly, which is why, for me, Claws does come out on top for the skills. But the nice thing about this skill tree overall is they are very It's quite close between a lot of these. There's not many awful ones. There's maybe 2 that I would never use. Anything from tentacles up, I have used and enjoyed using. So I have a particular soft spot for this skill tree, but it has to be it's worth mentioning that it really is specific to certain players and to certain roles within the team. Unlike things like block and dodge, where you can blanket off across quite a few players, it's only certain individuals who are going to benefit from most of these skills. Okay, so that's my top 10 mutation skills. See what you think. See if you agree with some of the things I've said about them. It would be nice to see them do something for Ironhard Skin to make that a bit better. And hopefully, if there's a tweak to the rule set at some point in the future, or more passing orientated teams come to both tabletop and Blood Bowl 3, we might see more of a use for very long legs. I think you still see quite a bit of passing from high off teams at tabletop tournaments, and of course they might go for a brand new team. I've often thought it would be good to make Zinch the passing team of the Chaos teams, maybe through a use of extra arms and a few other skills to make them able to pick up the ball and pass it. Could be quite interesting and gives you something different. So you never know, we might find ourselves in a world with a bit more passing where very long legs is more useful. But for now, that's where I'm going to rank them. I think next we'll go on to do... Oh, we've only got one left, haven't we? So we'll do passing next to finish off the ranking of the skills, and then we'll go on to do top 10s about something else. I'd like to do top 10 positionals at some point. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thank you very much. Bye for now.